So I was doing my own thing on Elden Ring the other day, playing on my 9th character and researching future videos and challenge runs when I kind of had a realization. I have no idea how Melina works. No, not from a lore perspective, but I've noticed that Melina's early game triggers seem to be really inconsistent. I was about 8 minutes into a playthrough before Melina's second encounter to invite me to the round table hold triggered, but I've talked to a few people in my community who don't even seem to meet Melina until well after an hour into the game. Not even to mention the fact that some people can go hours upon hours without seeing the round table, and some people can sit back down at the Grace they met Melina and get the invitation instantly. All the weirdness got me thinking to check up on the interwebs, and between Reddit and the wiki, nobody seemed to agree. So instead of whatever iteration of the overpowered early build I was planning on making today, we're talking about Melina. More specifically, what triggers her to appear in the first encounter, as well as what specifically causes her to take you to the round table. It's simple stuff, but hopefully by helping nail this down and increasing the circulation of information in the community, we can get closer and closer to mastering our newest adventure. Okay, so let's talk about the first meeting. Melina appears to the player in a cutscene where she shows her lovely face and offers an accord. And before anyone asks, yes, we have a new Best Souls waifu. The problem is some players can go hours on end without triggering her first appearance, so what gives? According to the Elden Ring wiki, she's supposed to appear to the player after resting at the third grace on land. Not quite sure what on land means, I'm yet to find any water or sky graces, but we'll assume it means overworld. At first glance, this would make sense, but I highly doubt that Souls veterans would go hours on end without activating 3 graces. It didn't take long to disprove this theory either. Starting up a new character and running directly to the castle gates without ever touching another grace on the map will result in Melina appearing. So it's not exactly tied to the number of graces visited. If it was, then the first grace I visited wouldn't trigger her cutscene. Interestingly enough though, I did decide to test running around to some other graces, and to my surprise, she actually showed up at graces other than the castle gates. Not only did she show up, but there were unique backdrops to fit the area on each of the cutscenes, which may seem simple, but did color me impressed. The conclusion we can come to is that Melina's first appearance is not set to the number of graces visited, but rather tied to very specific graces. Mostly on the first continent, it would seem, as I went ahead and made a character that ran across most of Caelid and parts of Liurnia without her introduction ever happening. She also wouldn't ever appear at First Steps or Church of Alais, which may explain the base of the 3 grace theory, as you're likely to hit these 2 before adventuring to any of the graces with cutscene triggers. The place that caught me off guard where Melina would appear was actually the first grace on the Weeping Peninsula, an entirely different continent from the starting area. This raises some questions, but I think the game actually considers the whole Weeping Peninsula to be part of the starting area. More on that later though. For now, we can say for sure that Melina's first appearance is tied to resting at specific graces with the ability to trigger her cutscene, rather than having to do with a number of graces visited. I haven't found every single grace that the cutscene triggers yet, but for now, Agiel Lake South, Agiel Lake North, Gatefront, and the Bridge of Sacrifice are the main graces I've been able to get Melina to appear at. Last thing I thought was interesting enough to mention is that no matter the time of day, Melina's introduction will always set the in-game day-night cycle to nighttime. This may not seem huge for most people, but I definitely could see its use in speedruns. Then comes the more interesting part, getting Melina to invite us to the clubhouse. This part is a bit more finicky. For starters, the most widely circulated method is that dying to Margit and resting at the grace will trigger her invitation. Unlike the first appearance though, I tested this a few times and without fail got the invitation to appear. Then again, many players seem to encounter the invitation without ever knowing Margit even exists, and that doesn't explain why some players seem to be able to just sit back down after meeting Melina and immediately get an invitation. I decided to test out a few different theories and see if there was some other kind of trigger that could get her to invite the player. For starters, I tried spam resting at a grace to see if it was maybe tied to either random chance or a number of rests, which didn't seem to work. I tried to spam kill my character and see if a number of deaths would get her to invite me, which was also a bust. And I was able to access the round table hold with several level 1 characters, so level ups are also a dead end. Funny enough though, just a straight up ride to Liurnia using the Godric skip, which is a totally intended path by the way, there's no shenanigans involved, and we get the invitation. In my testing, Liurnia seemed to always trigger her invitation to appear, which then gave me the idea that exiting the starting area is what probably gets her to appear. Sounds like a smart idea, but a lengthy trip through the Weeping Peninsula and even parts of Castle Morn and I was still without a round table invitation. Liurnia and apparently Margit's stick seem to work, but the southern continent doesn't. That's what led me to test entering Caelid, both through the teleporter trap and traveling via the Goodest Boy torrent, and in both cases I was given an invitation to the hold. So the game seems to have an adversity towards the Weeping Peninsula, but traveling to Caelid or Liurnia seems to be fine. I tried a great number of things, but Margit, Liurnia, and Caelid were the only things that I could find that would trigger the invitation. That made me think that the area had to be either of story significance or of sufficient level. After all, it may be true that the Weeping Peninsula is a starter area. Both seem to be false, because not only did the Siofra River not work as a place to trigger the invitation, but I went to the freaking capital at the base of the Erd Tree and was still invitationless. Seriously, there's a teleporter trap at the southern tip of the Weeping Peninsula that causes you to go all the way to the Royal Capital. So Liurnia is fine, but Royal Capital isn't. Thanks, Elden Ring. Funny enough, the game does seem to track if you visited Caelid or Liurnia, even if the first Melina appearance hasn't happened. I tested to see if triggering Melina's first appearance after visiting Caelid or Liurnia would actually result in getting the mythical immediate invitation, and it worked 100% of the time. So overall, in order to get Melina's first appearance to activate, you need to visit one of many graces that have one of the iterations of her introduction cutscene tied to it. After that, you then need to be either introduced to Liurnia, Caelid, or have your kneecap privileges revoked by Margit for her invitation to the hold. But the biggest thing for all of you players who seem to go hours without seeing her is to remember to actually rest at your graces from time to time, not just touch them. Activating graces, in my experience, will absolutely never summon Melina or activate her triggers. You have to rest. So if you're watching this and going, yeah, I did all that and she still isn't showing up, make sure you've actually sat down recently. But that's all the information I've got on the topic for you today. Like I said earlier, I've got tons of ideas for content from guides to challenge videos in the works, so make sure to pop that subscribe button if you're looking forward to seeing what else I have in store for Elden Ring. And as always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you gamers on the flip side. Later!